Hey guys, so I'm coming at you with another video today, and today I was going to talk about um, mostly my experiences in the psychiatric ward, but that's kind of a short story, so I kind of wanted to do a long story on kind of my symptoms, my delusions, even though I've kind of already gone over that, but I'd like to go over them in greater detail. Um, so I want to talk about how um, how it all started, how my schizophrenic symptoms all started, and how I ended up at the psychiatric ward. Oh, let me take my glasses off. Okay, so let's see. Uh, well, my schizophrenia started back in 2016, and it was it started around February of 2016 is when I really started to notice the schizophrenic symptoms. Um, but I developed anxiety pretty bad and even had a few psychotic breaks uh, years before that. I don't know that's what it was that I had, so perhaps my onset of schizophrenia started a lot sooner than I thought, but the schizophrenia itself didn't show up until years later. I can remember the first psychotic break I had was at work. Um, you know, I always had this thing since my whole life. I don't know if anybody else has it, if it's normal or not, because I don't know what normal is, mentally speaking. But I was always able to hear myself thinking in my head, right? I think they call that the constant stream of consciousness or constant stream of thought, where you just things are playing in your head all the time, right? Just random ass thoughts. Um, and I remember I was at work, and if I just said pause, my head would go silent. My brain would go silent, and I wouldn't be able to hear any thoughts. And then if I said something to snap back out of it, then my thoughts would start going again. And it really freaked me out that I could stop my thoughts, or what I thought I was doing was stopping my thoughts. It was a delusion, but it scared me to the point where I passed out at work, and I had to be sent to the hospital. And they didn't really do anything there. They put an IV in my arm and sent me home. So that was my very first psychotic break that I can remember, though at the time I didn't really notice it as a psychotic break or a mental breakdown, an emotional breakdown, whatever you want to call it. I don't really know which one it was, but my real symptoms of schizophrenia started off in February of 2016, a few years after this happened. Um, everything was pretty normal, and mind you, I never did drugs. I never drank alcohol. Um, so those external factors had nothing to do with my schizophrenia personally. I know a lot of people who did drugs and they developed schizophrenia as a result of doing drugs. So that can happen. Um, but that's not the case for me. For me, I just kind of developed it slowly over time. Um, so I just remember being in front of my computer like I am right now, 2016 in February, and I was just kind of browsing the internet, and then I kind of went off into a daydream. And the daydream turned out to be pretty nice. and it was just about me and some friends on a cruise. You know, I don't know why I decided to daydream that, but I did. And everything was all fine and dandy in the daydream. And then all of a sudden, I got the idea that I'm gonna shove my friend off the boat. I didn't do it, but the thought was there. Um, and that scared me. And I snapped out of my daydream and began to worry about why I had that thought. And it bothered me for days. And then eventually I kind of just let go of it and thought, oh, that was a weird thought. Um, so come a few weeks later, I wasn't daydreaming, but the thought of pushing that same friend over the boat and into the water came back up, and this time in my thought, I did it. I actually pushed them over the edge into the water, and that scared me. Again, really bad for the next couple of days, and it went away, and I didn't think about it for a few more days, and probably about 4 days later, um, I had my first hallucination in a dream, um, and this is where I started experiencing derealization. I experienced both depersonalization and derealization, but I experienced derealization first. And in this dream, um, I remember being in a dark room and there was just this one light, kind of like when you see um, those your typical um, I'm sorry, I lose my train of thought easily. It's the disorganized thoughts. It's part of having schizophrenia. The interrogations that you see right on TV and movies of people with that one lamp that hangs down from the ceiling and shines the light onto the table. Well, it was like that, but there's no table, just the light shining down onto a floor. And I was in this room, and then all of a sudden, um, I was something happened and I ran away, and then I found myself in this pit, and in this pit, it was made out of concrete, right? And in this pit there were these two big blades that were connected onto some kind of mechanical device, and these blades would go up and down this mechanical device. It would go one way, then it'd come back the other, and it would cut anything and sever anything that was there, right? That it came into contact with. So you had to get out, and there was a chain link fence on either side of the cement parts of the pit. And somehow I climbed up the cement, and I climbed up just far enough on the chain link fence to be able to pull my legs up in time for the blades not to cut my legs off. And and I remember the environment being very dim and very dark in the backgrounds, and it was with a red tint. There was a red tint to everything. And as I was climbing this chain link fence, on the other side of the fence, a demon came out of nowhere, and this demon latched onto my hands and was holding me there. And I remember looking at him, and I remember him laughing at my face. He was just laughing, a very maniacal laugh, while he was holding my hand so I couldn't climb up any further on the chain link fence and escape. And I remember every time the blades would come towards me, I'd have to pull up my legs, and then I would let them go, and the blades went back the other way. And he was just laughing at me the whole time and holding me there in one spot. And then I remember out of nowhere, this little girl came out of nowhere, and she attacked the demon, and I was able to climb over the fence, and she said, "I'm here to help, follow me." And so I followed her, and I found myself in that dark room again, and she just kind of stopped, and she turned around, and her eyes were red, and she had very sharp teeth, and her hands were turning into claws, and the claws were growing, right? And she started chasing me, and then that's when I woke up, and I was scared to death. I didn't know what just happened, right? Having dreams about demons and demonic stuff, like, that's scary shit. And being a churchgoer, as somebody who believes in God, like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that I just had a hallucination within my dream, um, because that's actually a common thing to happen in people with schizophrenia, is not just having delusions or hallucinations while you're awake, you also get them when you're asleep. And a lot of the times you have split realities, like I do and still do to this day, where you can't tell the difference between if what you just experienced was indeed a dream or if that was real. And that's where my realistic dreams started, and where I still have those to this day. They're not all like that, mind you. They're not all spiritual and things like that, like I just described. Sometimes they're really good dreams, but they're every time I go to sleep, every time I dream, um, I can feel everything. Everything's just as real as you sitting across from me and us talking. It's I could feel everything. I could physically touch things. I can feel textures. I'm in control of what I say, most of the times of what I do, but I'm not in control of what happens in the dream itself, though I'm in control of me. But everything is very real. It's very realistic. I mean, like today I had a dream, right, where um, some girl, some really cute girl, she asked me if she could borrow my tablet to play a video game on Facebook, and I was like, sure, being the nice guy I am, I was like, sure, yeah, here, use it, and she used it, and she uploaded something to it. She uploaded the game, but the game turned out to be a very demonic game, and she uploaded some kind of virus that took over my tablet, and that ended up taking over my computer, and all that was available was a website that led to um, satanic rituals, and um, just everything that was on my computer um, and on my tablet turned into almost a dark web type of stuff, right? Where everything on it was related to satanic stuff, and it's what everything turned into on my computer. Um, so that was scary. That was just this morning. And I woke up afraid again and scared, but I knew it was a dream. I was able to come into reality and realize, okay, that was just a dream. That was scary, but it was just a dream. And I have a lot of very vivid, very scary dreams like that. And I mean, I've had dreams before, like when I was going through my schizophrenic stuff, um, that there was a male figure, whether it was a demon or whether it was just a male figure, um, latched onto me from behind me and would rape me from behind and at his own leisure, and I was under his control, and there was no escape. And that was another very real, vivid dream I had that was scary. Um, and I really woke up feeling like I had been raped, because I felt everything. Like when he touched me, when he do stuff to me, like I felt everything, and it was very surreal and it was very scary. So I woke up not knowing that was a dream, um, and I actually woke up crying from that one. That was how real it was and how scary it was. And I don't know what triggers these things. But I mean, a lot of the times my dreams are, even though they're very real, they're not bad like that. When I get one of those really bad dreams like those that I just explained, um, those usually occur very rarely. Other times they're just weird dreams that don't make sense, or they're actually pretty nice. So those are the only places I still have hallucinations in, are my dreams. I don't get the bodily hallucinations anymore, like I said before. Like I've mentioned before, where I thought I would have lumps on my body, or I thought I had gangrene. Um, you know, um, so like my physical hallucinations I don't have anymore. Um, but I still have the hallucinations um in my dreams. I still get hallucinations in my dreams, and um it's very surreal. It really is. Dreaming for me is a crazy experience, and this is every single day. And so that's probably something that for me is never going to go away. Um, but yeah, that's where it all kind of started. So that week, going back to that third week after those two initial daydreams I had, to the hallucination and the dream I had, with the demon latching on to me. Um, that stuck with me for weeks, and the fear and wondering, why did I have this dream? I didn't know that there was something going wrong in my brain, right? I didn't know there was chemical imbalances going on, sensory overloads. I didn't know any of that. Because like I said, back then I was very spiritual, I was very Christian, and as Christians we're taught not to believe in psychology and mental health, the mental health field. So we are very unknowledgeable and uneducated in the mental health field. Um, so I didn't know what was going on, and the only thing I knew I had was anxiety. I already knew I had anxiety, but I didn't know about the schizophrenia. And then I remember I would just start getting thoughts about hurting myself. I started seeing, I started getting the derealization, right? Where I'd wake up and nothing would seem real. If you don't know what derealization is, it's just when you can't mentally connect yourself to your environment, and the environment and everything seems fake. Everything seems like a dream. It's really weird. It's really strange, but if you have derealization, or you've ever um, experienced it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Um, so I remember just waking up and having to touch things just to make sure I was awake, to make sure things were real. I remember I would just stare at the walls, I would just stare at the sheets on my bed, and be amazed at how unreal they were and how disconnected I was from reality. And to the point where I even started questioning if I was still alive, where I'd question if this was just all fake. And I started getting into philosophy, right? The philosophies, you start thinking of, what is the meaning of life? Like, what is reality? What am I? What am I? What is this? What is that? What's the reality of things? And I'd start analyzing things like that. But anyways, I started having these thoughts about hurting myself. And it started about because I would look at things and I would start analyzing things as weapons. Um, Started off with pens and pencils, how I could stab myself with those, and how potentially dangerous they were. And then I started looking at knives and thinking about how I could hurt myself with knives. And even like tools, like gardening tools, I started seeing blunt force objects, and it just started, everything I looked at, every object became a weapon somehow. Somehow I could weaponize every object around me, and I could figure out ways to hurt myself. Um, and I don't know why I was getting the thoughts. It's not that I wanted to hurt myself, But I was getting the thoughts of hurting myself, if that makes any sense. And then I remember that that started scaring me. So I would not have the thoughts 24/7 yet. I would have them for a long time during the day. At this point, it was turning into having these thoughts from having it every couple hours to having it every couple of minutes. So it was getting towards the stage of having these kinds of thoughts 24/7. Um, so it wasn't the thoughts I had 24/7 yet at this point, but the fear I did. Um, I would every moment I was awake was just in the fear of why I'm having these thoughts. Why am I seeing things as weapons? Why am I wanting to hurt myself? Um, and thinking that I'm going nuts and thinking that something's wrong with me, which there was, but I didn't know what it was, and I was trying to come up with conclusions, like, because for me, I'm a very logical person, right? So there has to be logic behind everything. Um, there has to be a reason behind everything. So I was busy trying to figure out the reason why I was having these thoughts. And the only thing I could come up with as a Christian was that I was possessed, that I had spirits, which come to find out isn't true. But that's what I thought. And that's what people from the church I went to started telling me. And it was very disturbing. And then I remember um, it started turning into a 24/7 thing where I had these thoughts constantly. And now I had these thoughts constantly, and then I had the fear of these thoughts constantly. And I remember making soup one day, and I remember walking by my cat with the soup, and the thought just came to my mind, what if you dumped it on him? What if you poured this hot soup onto your cat? Just dump it on him. And that scared me. And then I had to have the fear of that all day, and I went into my room, I ate the soup, but then I had this fear and I'm trying to analyze why I had this thought, and then I started noticing I felt very flat. I had no emotion. I started watching videos on YouTube, and I noticed I had no emotional connection to anything going on when I would watch videos on YouTube. That was my favorite pastime back then, was watching YouTube videos and playing video games. Um, and I noticed that I couldn't feel happy anymore. Um, I couldn't feel relaxed. Um, I couldn't feel sad. I couldn't feel anger. I couldn't feel emotional connections to things. I couldn't feel love. Um, like my cats, I love my cats. I'm always been a cat person, and to sit there and pet my cat without having an emotional connection or feelings for my cat or any love for my cat, um, that kind of opened my eyes and sparked even more fear into me. Like, oh my God, I can't feel emotions. I literally can't feel emotions. And I was just flat, and that scared me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm turning into a psychopath. Right? That was the first thing that came to my mind, is this is what happens to psychopaths. They lose their connection to their emotions and their feelings. And I remember it turned into things where the couple of days after that, my mom was out in the pond in the back, and here's some trigger warnings. I'm giving trigger warnings, like, if these kinds of things trigger you, don't watch this video, right? I probably should have said that earlier, because I'm not trying to trigger anybody who might have schizophrenia. I'm just trying to explain my story and what happened and my symptoms, right? And give people with schizophrenia hope that these kinds of things can go away. Because my intrusive thoughts, these things that I'm explaining, are my intrusive thoughts that I had. Like I said, I never heard voices, but I had the intrusive thoughts, which are on par with voices. They're not voices, but they're they're thoughts that come at any time and you can't control them, just like the voices. They're just pretty much like voices in a different format. You're just not hearing anything audible. It's all coming from within your own mind. Um, but if things of harm trigger you, then skip over this part or skip over this video, whatever you want to do. Um, but I remember my mom was cleaning the pond and she was kneeling down next to it. And I remember thinking, man, what if I just go up and push her head under the water and just hold it there and drown her? And then that scared me. And I started crying. And I told my mom, like, Mom, I just had this thought and it was about you. And for some reason, my parents didn't do anything about it. My parents never sent me to a psychiatrist or psychologist. You know, if my kid told me at that point that they had the thoughts like that, I would make an appointment with a psychologist the next day, right? I would get them in, but my parents didn't. Um, I don't know why. Um, and from there, I started seeing objects as ways I could hurt other people with. It wasn't just about hurting me anymore. Now it was about hurting me and hurting other people. And I was getting all kinds of crazy thoughts about different ways I could kill myself, ways I could kill other people, and ways, if it wasn't that, it was ways I could physically harm myself, not necessarily killing myself, and different ways I could harm other people, like punching people and strangling people and suffocating people. It was really scary. It was intensely scary. It was probably the most scariest time of my life that I was having these thoughts telling me to do these really bad things to myself and other people and to animals. And it even turned into like breaking inanimate objects and wanting to smash things, you know, and it was almost like getting an anger, but I wasn't angry, but it was the same kind of symptoms, right? And I thought I was going to turn into a full-blown psychopath, you know, and it was very scary, and it just got to be so much one night, like, and it got to the point where I wasn't eating too. That was another thing. I was manic, with these thoughts. I would not be able to sleep, excuse me. I would be up for 1, 2 to 3 days straight before I finally got to sleep, and when I did go to sleep, it was only for like 30 minutes to an hour, and then I'd be back up. Um, so I was rarely sleeping, and this lasted for 2 months at least when I got the manic episodes. And I was just going into full psychotic breaks. I was having these psychotic thoughts. Um, you know, I stopped eating. I wasn't eating. I couldn't eat because I didn't feel hungry. I had this constant fear, and when you're constantly afraid, your stomach hurts, and you have all this adrenaline going, and you don't want to eat. So I went from weighing 112 pounds, because you can see, I'm a pretty thin guy, right? I don't have a lot of meat on my bones. I still only weigh 110 pounds to this day. I have a very high metabolism. But I went from weighing 112 pounds in February of 2016 to weighing only 62 pounds in July of 2016 when I got admitted into the psychiatric ward. So after having all these kinds of thoughts constantly, and I just remember at nights I'd wake up just screaming to God and crying to God to take these thoughts away and to heal me. I remember begging at the top of my lungs, and just being up crying and being just afraid, constantly afraid of myself, being afraid of the thoughts I was having. I would sit in my closet with the light off in there, just in the dark, just because if I couldn't see anything, I couldn't do anything, right? I wouldn't be able to act on my thoughts if I couldn't see anything. So I would just sit in the dark closet. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating. It was really bad. And that brings me to July, the 2nd of July, when it was 2 in the morning, and I had enough. I tried drawing. I tried distracting myself, and I was just having thoughts like visions of blood and visions of um, limbs that were detached from people's bodies, and these internal visions of bloody meat and cut up pieces of animals and stuff like that. And it was really disturbing. And just that would turn into thinking of things of weapons, to things of hurting myself, to things of hurting other people. And it was all these things that were constantly just booming in my head all at one time. And the amount of fear I had, like, I can't even describe the way it felt. That, I mean, I didn't know what to do. And I remember a friend telling me that if you ever got into a really bad position, call an ambulance and they'll take you to a psych ward. And I felt that at that time I couldn't handle it anymore. I literally felt like if I went on another day without any help, that I was going to die. And that's how bad it felt. And I could not literally live another day like that. So I called 911 at 2 in the morning and I told them everything. And they sent an ambulance to my house, they sent the police to my house, and I went to, I think it's called Community Hospital in Long Beach. They have a psychiatric ward there on the fourth floor. And so I remember getting to the hospital and waiting in a hospital bed. They made me do a blood test or a piss test to make sure I wasn't doing any drugs. So once they confirmed I didn't have any drugs in my system, they sent the psych a God, I can't. There's a word. It just slipped my mind. A like an assessment person came in to evaluate me, and he asked me questions and I gave him the answers, and he's like, "That's pretty scary." And I was like, "Yeah, no shit. I know it's scary. That's why I'm fucking here," right? That's what I told him. And so they send me up. A security guard escorts me up to the fourth floor to the psychiatric unit, and I remember they made me strip down to butt naked and just get into a hospital gown. And from there, they evaluated me some more and asked me some questions and made me sign papers. And they signed me up as a 5150. And then they took me into the bathroom where they made me take off the hospital gown. And they examined me for bruises to make sure I hadn't been hurting myself, to make sure I wasn't injured. Then after that, they assigned me a room with a roommate. And honestly, my first day was pretty good. I mean, I had activities and things. They had a whole schedule planned for each day of different things they were doing, and literally we were free to do whatever we wanted there that they had open to us. They had a rec room where it was a little TV with only a few channels on it, and they had puzzles, they had chess, they had checkers. I played chess with the guy. Um, you know, so the first day wasn't that bad. I remember sitting there having my thoughts really bad, and I just started crying, and one of the guys working there came up and asked me what was wrong, and I explained to him. Um, and I just sat there crying. And I remember people trying to get me to just sit down and watch the TV. I couldn't even watch the TV. Certain things on the TV would trigger me and would trigger my thoughts even further. So I just felt the only thing I could do was go back in my room and sleep. So I just sat in that room and slept pretty much all day. And I remember the second day when I finally got to see a psychologist at the end of the day. I don't know if he was a psychologist or if he was a psychiatrist, but it was really late in the day, and I remember just going through hell that day. Like, just the thoughts about hurting other people and hurting myself, even though I was in a safe place, was just so strong. And that's one thing they do when you're there too, is they take anything away from you that you could possibly hurt yourself with. So strings on your shoes. Luckily, I went in sandals. Um, Either I was in sandals or I was barefoot, one or the other, so they didn't have to do anything with those. They took the drawstrings from your pants and they cut them off. So basically, all you had was the clothes on your back. You weren't allowed to bring your phones, your tablets, nothing. Um, so I remember going to use the bathroom one day, and I just had this thought that told me, and it wasn't a voice, but it was a thought in my mind, an intrusive thought that told me while I was there that I had to suffocate my roommate that was in the room with me with the pillow. And that was a breaking point. After I had that thought, I got so scared, I went into a full-fledged psychotic meltdown. And I just remember standing there shaking, and I went I went to them screaming for help, and I remember falling down on the floor and in the fetal position, and they just kind of left me there as was, and I was crying, and that thought just kept ruminating in my mind about suffocating my roommate with a pillow, and the fear was going on, and it was just a constant cycle, and it was the thought, the fear, the thought, the fear, the thought, the fear, the thought, the fear. And then they finally got me in to see the person that gave me my medications. I told him everything that was happening, and that's where he diagnosed me with schizophrenia. Um, and then I took the meds, and they gave me a tranquilizer so I could sleep. They gave me Zyprexa, which was the first drug I was on for my antipsychotics. That I was on for about a year and a half before I switched to Rexulti with the psychiatrist that I'm seeing now, and that I'm still on Rexulti to this day. And I remember the next day everything was actually pretty fine. Like, I noticed I didn't have any of those violent thoughts towards myself or towards other people anymore. That was all gone. But the fear was still there, and the anxiety was still there. But I stabilized by the fourth day, and I was ready to go home. But the psychiatric ward itself was not bad. Honestly, like, some of the situations with some of the people there were kind of freaky, because there's some people with some severe stuff in there. Um, but I mean, they had activities for us to do. They had 3 meals a day. Um, I mean, I got extra food because I was so thin. So that was cool. And they treated me really nice. Um, the only thing is that the lady there, she actually lost. She gave my ID and my credit card that I came into the hospital with. She gave that to the wrong person, so I had to cancel my credit card and get a new ID from the DMV and stuff, and it was just a mess. But I mean, other than that, the psychiatric ward wasn't scary. It wasn't like you see in the movies. It's a psychiatric ward is just it's not what you see in the movies. Um, and everybody's experience with the psychiatric ward is going to be different depending on the severity of their mental illness. So, um, and then that kind of leads me to my intensive outpatient program that I went to for a while, where they helped me deal with the schizophrenia. They weren't really able to help me with my anxiety, because it was shortly after I got out of the intensive outpatient program that I started developing agoraphobia. And I had agoraphobia for about a year and 10 months, maybe even 2 years. Because, I mean, just recently I was able to defeat and overcome my agoraphobia. Back in either June of this year or May of this year, I decided that I was going to pull up my big boy pants and that I was going to go outside and go places and do things, because I was tired of the only thing me feeling like I could do was sitting at home in front of my computer all day playing video games, because I was too scared to be alone at home by myself. I was afraid to go out places by myself. Being by myself was scary. Like, I always needed my mom and dad with me everywhere. And if they went somewhere, I went somewhere with them. Even if I didn't want to, because I was afraid of being by myself. I was being afraid of left alone, because what if I have a heart attack, or what if this happens to me, or what if that happens to me? Um, and I was afraid of being alone. And the same thing with going out, was because if I was this distance away from home or from a hospital, what happens if I'm driving and I pass out, or what happens if I'm driving and I have a heart attack, or what if this bad thing happens, and that bad thing, and this bad thing, and that bad thing happens? And that fear just gripped me to the point where I couldn't drive, I couldn't go to school, and I didn't go to school. And I'm still unemployed to this day. I haven't been at work for 3 years now, because I couldn't work, I couldn't go to school, I couldn't leave the house by myself for 2 years. And I left work 3 years ago, because that's when I started getting anxiety really bad. Um, and I couldn't work anymore, and then the schizophrenia shit started on top of that. So there was no way I was fit to work, and I haven't been able to find a job since. And to be honest, in the 2 years from between now and when my schizophrenia started, in that recovery process, I didn't have the motivation, I didn't have the will to go back to work. And whereas now I'm actively looking for work, and now I'm going to college, and now I'm out making friends, I'm out hanging out with friends. I mean, I left the cultist organization I was in, I'm making new friends, I'm making new relationships. I'm going to therapy by myself, going to group therapy by myself, going to all my doctor's appointments by myself. I'm just going everywhere by myself. I'm turning into a very independent person again, like I used to be, before all this shit happened. And it's a very empowering feeling. But I had to make the pros better than the cons in my mind to get rid of the anxiety. I had where I was blowing up the negative things that could happen and stuff, I had to minimize those in my mind and the what ifs, and I had to maximize the positives and the here and now and the present. And once I was able to latch onto the present moment and not think of the future what ifs that might not ever happen, I was able to get rid of my anxiety, and I don't have it anymore, really. I mean, sometimes I'll have small, minute panic attacks and anxiety attacks, but I'm able to recognize that that's anxiety now. I'm able to recognize that that's a panic attack now. And I'm able to stop it in its tracks. So I don't really have that anymore. Like I said, I'll feel them coming on, but I'm able to subdue them with my own thoughts and my own willpower. And so, I mean, I experienced also when I was having my schizophrenic symptoms was depersonalization, where I remember staring at my hands and my arms, and just it didn't feel connected to my body. Like, though I could move my hands and move my arms, when I watch it, it didn't feel like it was me doing it. It was really weird. And that's depersonalization, where you're not connected to yourself mentally, and physically you're not connected to yourself. That's depersonalization. So I had both derealization and depersonalization. um, and sometimes I still have the derealization part, where I'll wake up and it won't feel like I'm in reality, and I can't tell if I'm in a dream or not. And like I said before in other videos, is I still have it where I can't recall if certain events were events that took place in a dream, or events that actually took place in real life. And that's kind of that's a delusion and a sense of derealization, right? Splitting apart from reality that I have. Um, because that's what schizophrenia is, right? It's the word schizophrenia means a split mind, um, which actually is it's more close to say schizophrenics have split realities rather than a split mind, because when people hear split mind, they think split personality disorder, which is actually DID now. It used to be multiple personality disorder, but now it's dissociative identity disorder, is what it's known by now. Um, but that's not all schizophrenics. It's actually in rare cases that people with schizophrenia have DID. I actually know a person who's schizoaffective, and she has DID. Um, she's a really nice person though, and that's a lot of things too. Is that people are so afraid of people like me who have schizophrenia, or who are schizoaffective, or who have DID, or who have hallucinations and delusions and stuff like that. I mean, we're not scary people. We're some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, some of the greatest people you'll ever find, and we're not scary at all. What we have is scary, but those are symptoms that we have within ourselves internally, you know, and if we're not taking our meds and stuff, like, sure, it can affect other people, but I don't think that means that you shouldn't be friends with a schizophrenic person, because we all need friends, you know, that, and it doesn't mean that people with schizophrenia can't ever have romantic relationships either, you know. I still hold on to that. Like, I'm 28 and I've never had a relationship. I've never had a girlfriend, but I still hold on to hope that maybe one day I can, and one day I'll find somebody who understands me and who sees me for who I am rather than the mental illness I have, and they'll be there to love and support me, like I'd be there for them. But that's still a future thing that hasn't happened yet. But you know, maybe I'll find somebody someday, and maybe I won't. I don't know. But to say that people with schizophrenia will never find love and stuff like that, don't ever think that, because you can find love just as much as anybody else can, um, and friendships just as much as anybody else can. I mean, like I said, we're some of the greatest people and some of the most intelligent people that you'll ever meet. So don't underestimate us. You know, just based off of our mental disorder. I mean, I stood up and told my whole class the other day that I had schizophrenia, and you should have seen the look on the on some of the people's faces, and it kind of made me chuckle, because I know the stigma is going through their mind. Um, but I mean, so that's kind of it. This has been a long video, almost 50 minutes. Wow. But I just wanted to share my story of my development of schizophrenia and kind of the things I suffered with when I had the intrusive thoughts, which I don't have anymore thanks to my therapists, thanks to therapy, and thanks to my medications. Um, you know, I'm a highly functioning schizophrenic now, meaning that I can function normally in society, where even if I'm having symptoms of schizophrenia, where people, it doesn't show, and people would never know that I'm schizophrenic if I don't tell them. Um, uh, you know, so, but I just wanted to share kind of my backstory on it. And I mean, that was pretty much it. That was my experience with the psychiatric ward. That was my experience with schizophrenia. That's kind of my story. Um, and if I kind of skipped over anything that you might want clarification on, like I always say, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be willing to answer them. Um, and hopefully somebody will find this video helpful. So I'm actually gonna end the video here. And thanks for coming by, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.